All right, this is day 2 of making a coil pot. I left this coil pot as a plastic bag here. In the classroom, I'm not sure how it'll be at your house, depends on the humidity of your house and all that kind of stuff, the temperature you keep it at. But I took this and I just covered it like this with a bag over the top for 24 hours, very loosely. The top is still a little wet, the bottom is drier because it was sitting on my board. And now I'm ready to continue working with my stencil. If you have a banding wheel, this next part's a lot easier. And I'm going to first do a little bit of paddling on the sides, I'll do a little bit of smoothing on the sides, and then I'm going to add a coil to the top. So the first thing I'm going to do with my project is I'm going to take my rib and I'm going to start smoothing it out. I was using some red clay earlier today, so I'm just going to get this red clay off so it's not a distraction. There we go. So first I'm going to take my paddle and I'm going to just paddle the sides and try to get it as straight as I can. I'm going to rotate the pot very slightly, and I'm trying to paddle in any spots that look like they're dented or that they're warped. Any spots that maybe are sticking out too far. I can also push from the inside to kind of push side parts out. Very light paddling, it's a very light touch. And that's the process. Mine I paddled last time and it isn't, it's not that too far off. So I've also got my metal rib here, and I'm going to take my metal rib and go up the side. Now that it's a little bit firmer, I can push a little harder with the rib. This is going to help me really smooth this out and get like a nice continuous shape. So going from the bottom to the top, and I'm curling the rib and just smoothing it out. You can go sideways as well. I find that if I have coil marks where I can still see where the coils were, going sideways gets rid of those coils a little better than going from the bottom to the top. I can also do a little bit of work on this bottom part here too. It is a little bit drier. I can take my trimming tool and kind of level it out a little bit. This is leveling it from the top and just very lightly kind of scraping this and trying to get it to be a little bit less bumpy. This is just getting out some of the bumps. I don't want to remove too much clay. I'm trying to push as lightly as possible. And then I'll do a little bit on the sides a little bit later. I also have the inside to work with. I can use my finger to smooth the inside. I can also use my metal rib. I know it's hard to see in the video, but I can take my metal rib, and on the inside I'm using the curved part, the narrow part on the inside, and I'm running my tool up the inside just to smooth out the inside. Like I said, it probably doesn't matter for most of the shapes you're making if the inside is smooth or not. But this also will help prevent cracking. This kind of compression that I'm doing by blending the coils even further in towards each other is going to prevent cracking happening later. So it will make it look smoother on the inside, which is nice to look at as I'm working. It also is going to be joining the coils of clay into one piece a little bit more than I had just the first day by itself. I have my hand on the outside. I want to make sure I'm feeling it's not stretching too much. I like where my pot is and its width. I don't really want it to get too much wider. Hopefully by paddling it in, it'll fit my mold a little better. I'm just kind of going along the sides, this sideways now, and kind of cleaning up some spots on the inside. Again, this is much easier with the banding wheel. In addition to what I'm doing now with my banding wheel. Really effective use of your banding wheel. All right, one of the benefits of using a banding wheel, besides it being easier to kind of move around, is also that it's easier to check for radial symmetry. So you can see I can take my stencil and I can kind of go around and hold my stencil up and just make sure that all the sides look equal. If one side looks like it's bulging out more, or like here, for example, it looks like this side isn't coming out enough, where this side on the other side looks like it's a little closer, then maybe on this side right here, I can stretch it out a little bit. So now I know right here, it could do with a little bit of stretching out on this side, so it's a little bit more symmetrical radially. And I'm just doing that from the inside. Now I can check it again, and we're a little closer. Okay, so it's a lot easier to do with the banding wheel. But like I said, I'll try to make this without the banding wheel, so that those of you who don't have one can see it being done without. All right, so just like I said in my last video, I need to scratch and attach the next coil. I'm using one of my recycled coils. I'll use those two coils first, the ones that I recycled yesterday from my scraps. The first thing I need to do is I need to scratch the rim of my coil pot. It's a good habit when you scratch the rim to scratch it really thoroughly. I'm using my scratching tool for my tool set. You could also use a handful of toothpicks or something if you forgot or lost yours. I want to scratch on the sides a little bit because we'll be blending clay into there as well. So I'm not just scratching the very top, I want to be scratching the inside and the outside. And I want you to notice how thoroughly I'm scratching the coil pot. Because I don't want this coil to crack. Now my next coil after this, I don't have to scratch at all, so this is really all the scratching I'm doing for the day. So I might as well do a nice thorough job. Okay, so now the top of my scratched, I'll take a sponge. I'm gonna put a little bit of water. Just gonna kind of tap the damp sponge. Onto the surface. I want this to be a little wet, not dripping wet really, but just a little wet. And now I'm ready to add my next coil. So I've got my coil right here. This is the one that I made in yesterday's video that was recycled from my scraps. And I'm going to take this coil and just lay it on top. And if I look at my stencil, from here on, for the next couple coils, I'm pretty much going straight up. So I'm going to make sure my coils are pretty much straight up and down on my pot. Okay, I'm going to use my pin tool to cut through both coils like I did yesterday. I'll disregard these scraps. I will ball them up, and I'll recycle those at the end of the session here. I'm going to blend this clay together really well. Okay, and it's nice and sticky and it doesn't want to move too much, which is a good thing. Okay, I'm going to check to make sure that my coil is pretty much straight up and down, which it is. And now I'm going to blend this coil in. When I blend this coil in, it is really important that I push kind of down and I really think about joining these coils. On your first coil that you attach, this is where it's most likely to crack. So, between days, your first coil between days. So, take a little extra time and really make sure that you're blending the clay in. Kind of pushing down as I push down with my thumb. I'm pushing down on the top to make sure that it really gets stuck. I'm kind of wiggling it, making sure it's blended in. I'll be smoothing it down even more. I'm just making sure that it's all attached first. Okay. So that is the attachment on the outside. I'm going to go ahead and work on the inside. It's actually a little harder to blend the coils when your hands are wet. If you feel like your hands are sliding off the clay, dry your hands a little bit. That bit of water that I put on when I was scratching it, it's good for joining, but it makes it harder to smooth the clay out. So I'm really trying to keep this going straight up and down. I'm trying to add or blend this coil on the inside as well as I did on the outside. Okay. Just gonna go around it. Kind of clean up some stuff. I'm gonna make sure it doesn't go out. I'm gonna try to curl it in a little bit. I think this coil might be going a little further out than I want, but I'll be able to paddle it in. And the good thing is, if you don't like a coil, we can just cut it off with a pin tool and start again. You can put a bad coil on and then realize that, hopefully, and then just take it off and do another one. This should be fine though. Okay. So making sure that we're really nice and blended all the way around the outside, then I'll do the same on the inside. I'm using my rib as kind of like a scraper. It's kind of blending the clay together, scraping off any excess mud so it doesn't get too wet. And then on the inside, I can do the same thing. I'm blending it together. All right, so I'll leave the rest of this cleanup to do on the sides, the paddling, all that stuff with this last coil for tomorrow. But now my previous coil from the day before and my new coil are well attached. I can start adding new coils and I don't have to scratch the top. So I'm gonna grab another coil. This is my second recycled coil from yesterday. I'm gonna again put this on top. Cut it in this little section. And continue. It's always easier when you're making a coil pot. If you have it going a little further in, it's always easier to stretch it out than to push it back in. So I'm looking at my stencil, and my stencil is saying that I need to go out a little bit. I'm gonna keep going straight up, probably one more coil, and then I'll take the whole thing and stretch it out so that it fits. But it needs to go out just a little bit, and that's gonna be pretty easy when I paddle it. So I'm gonna attach this coil just where it is, even though it is going in and my shape goes out. I just know that it's easy for the pot to get away from you when you're making your coil pot, for it to get too wide too quickly. I'm just smoothing out some of the coils on the inside. It's always best to give it a quick smooth while it's wet. The drier it gets, the more work it is. This will also help it kind of stretch out a little bit now that I've put an extra couple coils on. I'm just taking the rib and swiping it across the clay. And that's going to smooth out some of the inside finger marks. This by no means is making the inside smooth, but hopefully it is making it fit my stencil a little bit. So I still need to go out a little bit more. This is where I can do some creative paddling. I can kind of push out with my fingers on the top and paddle beneath it. And that's gonna help very gently kind of stretch out the rim and make it a little bit wider. So I'm gonna go around the whole pot. I'm kind of lifting up on the last coil and paddling the 2 coils beneath it. And that's gonna kind of just straighten out or widen very slightly the rim. If your paddle, whatever you're using for a paddle, if you didn't borrow one, is getting a little sticky, just use a different side of the paddle or a different part of it. This clay is not wet, but it's damp enough where it gets the paddle sticky. Okay. And I'm gonna kind of lift up again and push out and kind of smooth. I'm lifting up with my hand and kind of smoothing out, lifting up. Now let's check our stencil here. There we go. That's pretty close. I think I'm gonna probably end up putting just these last maybe 2 or 3 coils today up to this mark, and then on day 3 I'll start doing this inside part, and that seems like it'll make sense. So I'm gonna probably fast forward the video from here to here and just finish the coil pot. I don't think there's much more that I can say about how to make a coil pot at this stage. You just want to be careful that you work slowly, that you blend the coils well, and then in between each day, you really want to give it a nice smoothing job. I probably, because I don't want the bottom to get too dry, tonight when I wrap it up, I'll put the plastic bag underneath the project like this, so that when I wrap it, the bottom is wrapped as well, because I don't want the bottom to get too dry. It makes it a little harder to finish carving it if it gets a little too dry. So that is the first part of the coil pot. I am just going to coil up these last few segments up to this part here.